on my attention. My countrymen, they love their fiction. Words upon now, it's made with good intentions.
Welcome to 10200, the Independent Politics and Media podcast. Oh, we're not allowed to say independent anymore because Vijay told us we're the media now. But I don't know how else to pitch it. We're a politics about the media and about politics and about all other kinds of things. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Stephanie Rogers. How are you doing, Stephanie?
Kia ora. Still surviving in this hellscape.
Hey, look, fantastic. Also joined by Oliver. How are you doing, Ollie?
Yeah, doing all right, thriving.
Thriving even.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible. And from the United States, first time in the co-host seat, Mardi, how are you doing over there?
Hey, well, I'm in the heart of the Imperial Core, and I'm feeling quite a lot right now, Kyle. Anyway, good to be here. Kia ora, everyone.
For people who haven't interacted with you online or in person, I guess, or definitely not on this podcast, what's your background and where do you kind of come at this stuff from?
Sure. For people who haven't met me in any capacity, I'm as a long-term activist, mostly in Melbourne. That was formative, born in Aotearoa, and I've worked as a trade unionist in Australia and in Aotearoa, and for a brief stint in the US. Carl knows this, but for the listeners, I rage quit the Teamsters a couple of weeks ago. So now I am unemployed in the land of the free, which is just another little American dream. Anyway.
Was that, can I ask, perhaps related to a certain endorsement at the RNC?
Look, that didn't help. There was, I'm going to be honest, I had some real ill feeling towards management for quite a while. It was, I loved the members I would have died for and the work I was really passionate about. It was more just, I'd had a couple of instances of quite gross sexism in the past few weeks. And then it's both too convoluted and dull to go into, but just a very tense meeting at which I was meant to eat shit for some, to be quite frank, fuck-ups that had happened way above my pay grade. And I wasn't happy with that. So I read Miss Rose. I quit on the spot. But it was a Zoom meeting, so I had to then fumble around for the end
Leave
call
meeting.
Button, little ignominious, leave meeting, squint at the screen, etc. So now I'm looking for work in Philly, where I'm now based.
Fantastic. There'll be lots to discuss and a range of those issues. We're doing a little bit of what do you call it? Forensic
Post-mortem?
That's the one. A post-mortem. I was going to say like a corpse investigation, but
Sure, why not?
that's a little bit. I said it anyway. Around the election in the United States, because as much as we would love it to be otherwise, what happens in the US does directly impact the rest of us, even if we're not right now at the direct end of a US rifle or missile or aircraft carrier. The US has cultural hegemony as well, and so it kind of sets the scene for what's permissible and what's allowed in the politics and kind of social mores of the other Western countries that affix themselves like leeches, maybe, but perhaps that's too charitable.
Remora's on a shark.
Remora's on a shark.
Yeah, perfectly fitting because we're there latching on, hoping that we'll get some little scraps of food that will drop from the shark's mouth, which, we do in the form of imperial super profits. So, and even if it wasn't for the fact that we had American lobby groups who were actively engaged in disrupting our elections and influencing our major parties like National and ACT, it's still pretty clear that those guys are pretty, should we say, glued to the American politosphere. We were sort of laughing the other day when Chris Luxon was trying to make a point about job losses and said it's time to update your resume. And I was like, this man has spent too much time in just like in American conversation circles, because we don't call it a resume in New Zealand, it's called a CV. But you see, I've seen it, David Seymour had a few similar slip-ups as well, where they just start dropping these Americanisms, these American jargon terms into the way that they talk. And it's just very clear that they're spending an inordinate amount of time with their, shall we say, handlers.
Yeah, or just like reading through their comms documents, right? Which are like, we always get told we're doing a conspiracy theory when we talk about the coordination of fucking media comms and policy strategies. But when they do this kind of like thing, when they're using exactly the same terminology, when they're using exactly the same arguments, even when those do not directly apply to the situation here in Aotearoa, they tend to give the game away.
Another really nakedly palpable one right now is the comms that come out. It's mostly stark between Australia and Canada, but after some kind of Israeli atrocity. And then there'll be some just semantically near identical statements across the Anglosphere, across the Five Eyes, which Americans aren't aware of, I'm finding out. They're not aware there are other eyes, possibly because theirs is the largest all-seeing eye.
Well, that's the thing, is how often are sharks aware that they've got remora stuck on their tummy?
It's like the US is a compound eye, but compound eye doesn't know that it's made up of lots of tiny little screens, right? Like, no, yeah, horrible, disgusting. We hate them all. But here we are. As far as we know, Trump won both the Electoral College vote and by a rather large margin, the popular vote as well.
First time since 2004 or something, I think, that they've won popular vote.
Yeah, it's a long time. Now, who knows what's going to happen?
And they've got the House and the Senate too.
Yeah, that's just come out today, right? Like the House has gone over as well, or continues to be in Republican control.
Well, that was kind of I think they expected that, but they were hoping that they'd still get the president's office.
I thought the House was wavering a bit at first.
Yeah.
Maybe this was just in the early optimistic days where people were just clinging to stats. But now it seems very, very clear they've got the whole bloody trinity.
Yeah.
And that means they can kind of do what they want. Coming to the last week of the election is when a lot of the rhetoric really started to get ramped up. Like we know these people are fascists. We know they're horrible misogynists and racists and bigots in every given way that you can imagine. But they've tended towards at least somewhat resiling from those views as far as trying to reach out to the electorate. And even alongside that, depending on where they're targeting, they're still using a lot of, left economic populist language to target other parts of the electorate. But, they had the Madison Square Garden Nazi rally, which it's just a bit too on the nose, even as far as like such posturing kind of tends to appear. And then you just had some of the most wild, out-of-pocket, open everything, bigotry.
Expressions of contempt for minority groups. Migrant community has been really thrown under the bus. But then the problem being that the Dems' response to that for the whole election was, actually, we're even going to be even harder on them. That stuff of like Kamala during her speeches joking and bragging about how Joe Biden has built more of the border wall than Trump did. And I'm like, oh, is that what we're doing now? We're this build a wall stuff that we were railed against in 2016. We're now saying, yeah, we're the guys that built the wall and we're doing a better job than you were. And I'm surprised to see that maybe didn't resonate with the base.
I was just saying, for all that, I mean, they're conducting their own. I mean, the Dem centrist headquarters are doing their own corpse investigation, as it were, and their findings seem to be that the campaign was too woke. It pandered too much to minorities. It was too transparently. It's beyond farce.
It's a real joke.
And the only next time that there's discussions of getting Fetterman up as their next leader, they will not will not pander to the woke again. It was to their ruin. So it's absolutely farcical.
I hate to be the most middle class white woman on the podcast, but John Oliver has a great great bit about that. Bless him. He did do a bit of a rant about, sorry, if you wanted a centrist campaign that pandered to the right on issues like immigration and law and order, you just had that. She lost.
I think this is one of those things where the first group given permission by what the Republicans have been doing for the last year and then accelerating over the last 6 months has been liberals. Has been establishment liberals,
and that's like, that's kind of the two big lessons that you could, if you were someone a bit more analytical, you could take this lesson, because the assertion from the sort of the people who make money lying to Democrats is that you have to run to the center in order to win people over, which is unusual because Donald Trump ran to the extreme right and it worked extremely well. He didn't run to the center. He didn't have to find the middle ground in order to win the election. He ran further to the right and he animated his base and they turned out in numbers. So clearly you don't have to run. So you might say, oh, well, then you have to run to the right. But it's just like, is that really how we're going to conduct these elections? Is that really what we want? Do people really want that? And it doesn't really make sense. But then you look at sort of the Trump stuff, because you were talking about how he was sort of dallying with left-wing populist rhetoric, all his talk of sort of draining the swamp, and now you look at his appointments, and he's brought in Rubio, he's brought in Mike Huckabee to be the new ambassador to Israel. Like he's brought in the swamp. He's repopulating it. Bless him, bless us. He recognizes that the swamp was actually a vital ecosystem. And he has sent in the conservationists to keep all the swamp creatures alive. It's his base don't see that hypocrisy. They're so drunk on victory and on all this stuff that they're not really, it never occurs to them that the guys who are railing against the elite might be the elite. It didn't occur to them that the richest man in the world being added into Trump's cabinet the guy who's, constantly whining about how the elite are evil, might be maybe part of that elite. And now he gets to be the co-chair of a new government department that was set up to reduce government bloat. So they created a new government agency to decrease government bloat. And in doing so, they've added two directors for that new government agency. Again, we're here to reduce bloat. So Elon Musk and Vivek, I'm not going to even attempt the last name because I don't want to muck it up. Ramaswamy. The two co-leaders of that new department, and they also named it after an internet meme. So that's essentially
just to drive up their Bitcoin as well, not Bitcoin, but their
Dogecoin.
Yeah.
I've never said that phrase out loud, and I feel sick saying it.
That's fair. Good reaction. So I think there's a part of this which is about, God, stop me if I sound like a broken record, but politics is emotional. It's not rational. People aren't voting.
Nice.
Everyone believes that they're the sensible voter who totally read all the policy and totally made an informed choice. But fundamentally, the human brain is not very good at anything.
This is why I roll dice every election.
There you go. That's the only informed way to really make your voting decision. But people like what they like on an emotional level, and what a lot of people see in Donald Trump is the world has been changing around me and I don't like it, and he promises he's gonna thump the people who make me feel bad. And when they think of the elite, they have no material analysis of Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He is by definition elite. They think elite is a college student with blue hair might tell me that my opinion is bad and that's the worst thing in the world, and that's what they think elite is. And in a way, that's a perception that has been deliberately fostered and grown and completely unchallenged by the US media. And just insert a 5-hour podcast episode there. But it's very frustrating because you can say that and then you see Democrats who don't want to change, who don't want to be more left-wing or more progressive, will say, yeah, you're right, it is about perception. So even though we may not have run a progressive campaign, people perceived it as a progressive campaign. And that's why we need to try even harder next time to make sure that no one perceives us as progressive. But how many times do we have to do this? Again, I get American exceptionalism, but New Zealand Labour, UK Labour, Australian Labour, whatever they're called in Canada, the centre-left, big asterisk for the Democrats, but the centre-left keep fucking doing this and saying, oh no, but if we just show people our spreadsheets and how our spreadsheets have a lot of police officers on them, then they'll stop complaining about pronouns. And it's never worked, folks. They think it works because Jacinda Ardern pulled a fluke and convinced Winston that his legacy would be enshrined by going with her. And it worked for Keir Starmer because the UK Conservatives. It doesn't actually work in terms of creating a base and creating a solid level of support and creating enduring movement for change. If change is actually what they want, I could get really cynically leftist about that, but nevertheless, it doesn't work, guys. Just go hard and have fun. Let's all just channel Tim Walz for the next however many years, because he was fucking great until the Clintons' septuagenarian advisors got their hands on him. Just have fun, be progressive, and if you're going to lose anyway, then you lose having fun.
Because that was you made the point about Keir Starmer and his sort of victory, but there is a fair point there that they managed to pull it off. But there's an interesting data point that came through recently that, at least in the West, most governments that oversaw the post-COVID inflationary period have all eaten shit. Not all of them. A couple of them sort of managed to sort of just scrape through, but it's been close and it's been catastrophic. And people who used to have a very strong mandate, like Macron, for example, have lost that mandate very clearly. And in his case, to left populists, which he used his parliamentary powers to keep out regardless, despite losing the election. And it's now just kind of wandering along as the perennial lame duck. But there's that factor, I think, in the UK of just like unbridled rage of the electorate, of going, everything costs too much and nobody's here telling me they're going to make it easier. But in the cases where opposition parties did come out and say, we are going to try and make it easier, it really went well. And that was the thing. Like, Trump's not going to bring the price of groceries back under control in America, but he promised he would. And Kamala said, well, that's just the cost of doing business. By the way, we've just given another $5 billion to Ukraine and another $5 billion to Israel. And people are going, okay, but I can't get by. And you mentioned the spreadsheets thing. They'd come back and say, well, actually, if you look at the spreadsheet, if you consult the graph, I know you said that a gallon of milk now costs twice what it did 5 years ago. But if you look at the spreadsheet, our GDP has gone up.
Yeah.
That also goes to what Stephanie was saying, I think, about, excuse me, perception and elitism, that they ran both a perception-based and highly elitist campaign. Really, I mean, inflation did seem to increase under Biden, but there did seem to be parasitic price increases that he could have regulated, that he could have pointed out in some capacity, that their campaign could have mentioned, rather than just saying, no, as you'll see, the spreadsheets, the benighted spreadsheets, the sanctified spreadsheets, everything is fine. Also, we're slightly off track now, but there were, I don't know if you follow what, in Nebraska and Missouri, there were actually some genuinely, and these are red states, just resolutely red states, there were some left populist policies that did still get through.
Yeah.
So, $15 minimum wage, which is now actually way too low, like below the inflationary increases from the current minimum wage, which is $7.25, by the way. The last went up in 2009. But yes, they raised that, paid sick leave, just some very, very, this is all seen to from a community campaign as well. So there is actually appetite for left populism, none of which was capitalized on.
Well, the even more extreme example of that was that there were multiple states that went red for Trump, but on the further down the ballot, repealed abortion bans.
Yes.
Which is like diametrically opposed policy, but you can see that there's an appetite for someone to come in and just be unabashedly left-wing and take on a policy that America historically has been horrific on.
This is the other thing, right? They're like, okay, we're going to vote for the thing that we want. Why would we vote for the Dems when they've had 4 years to make it law and just haven't, and just been using it to like try and pull us to the polls? Like, I mean, you reap what you sow in a lot of respects. Mardi, I wanted to can we get you to do correspondence stuff a little bit? But what was it like in that last week, and what were people actually talking about? Because from outside, all of this stuff looks pretty clear. But you were saying before that, people on the ground there don't even really consider that Five Eyes exists. They don't even know there are other eyes. What were the kind of differences between what you're hearing just from average Americans, or however you want to pitch that, and what most of us were seeing in terms of the framing of it abroad? I
mean, I'll be honest, in the past week, and it was hard not to, the past week leading up to the election, there was the usual, I would say, Democrat hubris. It was hard not to get caught up in that. There was also, I had the strong impression, and look, I haven't been in the States for an election period before, but the impression I had was that both parties seemed to be on the back foot. Both seemed to be campaigning as if they were losing and panicking slightly. Certainly after the Nazi revival rally at Madison Square Gardens, there was a sense that the Trump campaign had really overplayed their hand. There seemed to be that there was real discontent, especially Philadelphia, where I am, has a huge Puerto Rican community. People seemed pissed off at the racist comments by that comedian whose name I've completely forgotten. I'd never heard of him before. Tony Hinchcliffe, that's the one. Yeah, so there was a strong sense that they were going to coast through. Very quickly on the night, it seemed like we were just moving towards what was always inexorable. Yeah. sorry, I've moved probably a bit away from the question there, Carl. But yeah, the sense now certainly is that there's been a flurry of organising among the left. I mean, you'll see that, yeah, DSA meetings sort of had a huge spike. I went to one of those. It actually felt very practical. There was a lot of talk about real sort of mutual aid, material assistance on the ground. In the long run, I think it seems a lot bleaker. And God, sorry, I'm rambling because I'm very, very tired.
That's what it's all about. You're podcasting now. Look, ramble as much as you need to.
Yeah, there's a very strong sense that things are going to erode and become very, very swiftly fucked. Certainly my experience just from my brief capacity as a union organizer here, even with the current NLRB protections, there's a real sense of atrophy and terror and inertia, I'd say, among workers. And this is going to get immeasurably harder over the next few years. Also, I don't know if you saw today, there was that bill that nearly went through. Honestly, they had a higher threshold that will easily get through in January, or once they've got control of all the houses, and then organisations that are pro-Palestine, designated terrorist organisations, and a huge barrier, and what is already essentially a police state, will be any kind of organising. And just in the practical reality that will be, I mean, organisations will need to have bail money, that they'll need to have immense legal fees. Unions will need to have huge strike funds. I don't see how there is the will or the organisation or the capacity for any of this. And that sounds bleak as shit, but that's sort of, I don't know, this is how I'm spinning things, but how things are spinning in my head right now.
Well, that was kind of the crazy thing, was seeing how many Democrats got on board with that bill. There's 52 Democrats voted in support of it, and I'm just like, you're essentially agreeing that you've spent a large chunk of your campaign referring to the current contemporary Republicans as fascists, who you then also asked to come and campaign with you and cross the aisle. So you got Liz Cheney in your campaign, who is a fascist, but she's on our side. But then they've gone and created this, like, well, not created, but they've aligned themselves on this bill, which is essentially giving the president unilateral power to designate a charitable organization as a terrorist organization. And it's not just the Palestine guys that will be affected, it's all of them. If Trump decides that he's taken umbrage with, like, the ACLU, he can say, oh, well, you guys are, I don't know, supporting some kind of free speech terrorism, so we're going to remove your designation as well. They can essentially shut down any, but like you're talking about, the unions too. They can just say the unions are engaged in terrorism by striking, and next thing you know,
a versatile and very blunt instrument. And that will get through. It was fewer than 10 to get over the line, it seemed like today. That will get through very quickly in January. So yeah, that already, it's a tricky terrain.
What have people been seeing here, I guess, to switch tracks? It does feel, just, keeping track on social media, maybe even in some kind of more mainstream spaces as well, that immediately with the win, as it became very, very clear that Trump had votes for this, the arrogance, the sense of achievement and victory among like-minded people in the periphery, they just couldn't help themselves. And it'd be really interesting to see, I guess, the statistics on the use of particular slurs in the period immediately after the election day.
Yeah, I mean, the day after the election, I was just in a bakery, just going and getting myself a cup of coffee and a croissant, and some random guy just wandered in and just started ranting about what a beautiful day it was and how excited he was. And I was just like, what? Everyone's kind of giving him a weird look, and he's like, oh, I'm just so excited about the American election results. I know you. And then he looks and he notices that the two baristas are women, and he looks them dead in the eye and says, well, I know you're probably not that excited, but for us, I think it's you'll come to understand in the long term it's a good thing, and that America needed this.
This is exactly the shit I mean, man.
And they're just doing the classic, like, emotional labor thing of just, like, smiling and looking at him, like, uncomfortably, not saying a word. Mm-hmm. And after this, like, him just badgering them, trying to force this conversation, and they're literally stonewalling him, not a word. I stood up and I was like, man, maybe just leave them alone. And he starts to pick a fight with me. And I'm just like, maybe, just maybe, women aren't that excited about a man who is a certified rapist and is now in control of the most powerful military in the world. Maybe they're not that chuffed about it. And he just like sort of was flabbergasted that I could even believe such salacious lies about Trump. And in the end, I was just like, all right, man, maybe just leave him alone, and just left. But it was just this bizarre encounter of someone like just giddy about that election.
Ollie, I think you need to be a bit more respectful of that man's economic anxiety.
Yeah, based on the way he was dressed and where he was in Remora, I'm going to guess not one of his top concerns.
Yeah, to be a bit depressing, in my little feminist blue sky bubble, I have seen an unfortunate amount of not necessarily deifying, but definitely lionizing of Kamala Harris, and America just couldn't handle a qualified woman. And I'm like, okay, for one, you know that not just the United States, but our society, our global culture is sexist as shit and racist as shit. And then you have to add on top of that a broken electoral system and a broken media ecosystem, and the Democrats not actually running that good a fucking campaign. Like it's simply bad to put this all down to, well, he's a big oafish man and that's what America wants. For so many reasons. And also I now see that we've moved on to, well, maybe next time AOC could run for president, and everyone going, oh no, look, I'd love to support a woman candidate, but not her. Which is exactly, I remember, I'm almost sad that my Twitter account is now nuked, because I made a call back in fucking 2016 when everyone was just like, look, I would love, what if it was Warren? I would love it if it was Warren instead of Hillary. And then it was like, right, so not Hillary, but yeah, definitely Warren. And then if Warren runs, it's going to be, but maybe someone else. And then if someone else runs, but maybe AOC. And then if AOC runs, oh, but she's not ready. You'll always have a fucking excuse because it's misogyny. But yeah,
that's of course that's a factor, and but that is the battleground that you're entering into, and all that means is that you have to really try, you have to really work to overcome those things.
Yeah,
and
you have to not put Bill Clinton on the podium.
Well, and that's the other thing, because the counterpoint to that is that a lot of like women congresswomen, senators are doing really well. Rashida Tlaib got in with a mandate in a place that went for Trump. So it's just like
Ilhan Omar survived being primaried by her own party.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe the call is coming from inside the house. Maybe you're looking at the wrong things.
Again, it's trying to like rationally outfox the opposition and the challenges that Kamala Harris absolutely faced as a woman of color running for president. And they tried to be all, no, but actually she's basically one of the white boys. She loves cops and the military and also walls. And what they honestly needed to do is just go harder in the opposite direction. I mean, with her career background, you were never going to paint her as a raving socialist successfully, but lean into the fact that she's a stepmom. Lean into the fact that she's of mixed race. Lean into the fact that it would be really cool to have a black woman president. And challenge. They did the thing. They had those ads that I did think were clever, which were about, women kind of, making eyes at each other across the voting booth, and your abusive husband will never know you didn't vote Republican. But I think we also have to wrangle with the fact that a lot of white women just want to vote Republican.
More than half of them.
More than half of them. Hey, still outdone by white men and Latino men. So thank God. I'm only in the third worst demographic of American voters. If I were an American voter.
Congrats.
But lean into it. Just challenge people. Just say to Donald Trump, say it to my face. Say the JD Vance, say the slurs that you want to say to my face, and see how I take it, and see how Tim Walz then says that your dick's small. Just have fun with it and give your base something to believe in, not just, oh yeah, she is a woman of color, but she's a respectable, educated, good one. Like, just all but using the word eloquent to refer to her. Like, come on, guys.
Articulate.
It was
articulate.
Kyle mentioned it earlier, but that sort of like stuff about how they got the Biden advisors to come in and basically muzzle Tim Walz, and that quote about the I can't remember the name of the gent, one of the advisors who came along and said, "Oh, stop calling them weird. It's not resonating," and it's like not resonating with you.
It was off the charts as soon as he got, like him calling the Republicans weird was what made people go, I want that man to be vice president.
It made him one of the most, like...
Kamala to pick him. It would be very funny if a VP pick had the surname Shapiro. I get it. That would be hilarious. But that would... It's this thing that
nobody had heard of him.
Nobody
had heard of that dude, and then he comes out and he just comes out swinging, and everyone's like, "I like what he's offering. I like that guy."
He's perfect. Every anecdote about him was great. His kids trolled him on his Instagram reels, and it's another consistent thing that center-left parties do. Again, big asterisk for the Democrats, but they get someone who's good and charismatic and has reach. And I would even include Jacinda Ardern in this. And then they promptly go, no, stop it. Stop doing the thing that is great and that is attracting huge enthusiasm and buy-in to our campaign, because then we might actually create the conditions where we're expected to do something about the status quo being shit, and we don't want to do that.
That's too hard.
The crazy thing was he seemed to be pretty squeaky clean, because when the Republicans came out with their sort of Oppo research for him, the only two things they came up with was, one, he's secretly gay. We can't back that up, but we're just going to say it, and we're hoping that works for some reason. But the other thing they came up with was, when he was in his 20s, he went to China and fell in love with a woman, and we're going to tell the most beautiful and devastating story of just a love that didn't work out because of cultural and social barriers.
Literally their hook was, she still fondly remembers how good he was in bed.
And they're like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, have you guys ever considered? And then they describe the plot of a Wong Kar-wai movie, just this absolutely beautiful narrative on romance, and I'm like, oh, is this all they've got? But anyway,
there was
Kyle did
also
ask us to
Tampon
stay
Tim.
on.
There was briefly they had Tampon Tim that seemed to be their return salvo after the weird thing.
Because he gave a fuck about young cis women. Oh my god.
And
non-binary and trans.
Yes, I thought young trans men could access tampons in the cubicles. Yeah. The real thing that resonated, though, calling them weird, it was for the first time they'd actually othered Republicans, and they were so fucking unsettled by that. And all their attempts to kind of so angry and weirdly angry. They just dug in. Treated them like that they weren't actually this accepted, natural, embraced part of the ecosystem, which is clearly what the Democrat consultants that the DC base did actually want and was ultimately going to cultivate. So it was anathema to them. But fuck, it resonated. It was immediately after the Chicago DNC conference. Obviously, they brought in some of Britain, UK Labour. Yeah. They brought in the Obama team, and they poured water all over that little spark there.
Fucking embarrassing, eh? There's a really good point, one of our contributors at johnnyfilmo.substack doing his kind of corpse investigation over there. And one of his summarized points was whether or not it was malice or incompetence, which I think is a really interesting thing to think about.
Hanlon's razor.
Considering inside the tent and the Dems. Whether or not it was malice or incompetence that led the Democrats to lose, the fact they keep doing it means they should not be taken seriously.
Absolutely.
And that applies to every Liberal Party.
That spectrum is incredibly instructive. Once I'd heard that, I was unable to look away. And I was initially, I had them firmly in the incompetence end of the spectrum, and then by the end, it actually even bringing Clinton in to lecture Arab voters.
That was
in Michigan. It was
Richie Torres.
Well, that was another point that someone was making, was the Epstein recordings came out around about prior to the election, and including an anecdote in which Jeffrey Epstein describes Donald Trump as one of his closest friends, but the Dems couldn't use it because a week prior to that, they'd just put Bill Clinton up. Bill Clinton is also a former associate of Jeffrey Epstein, unfortunately. So you can't use the Epstein stuff because you might look like a hypocrite. Honestly, though, the thing they could have taken from the Republicans is that you can kind of be a bit of a hypocrite. They could have just, they could have said, fuck it, sure, we put Bill Clinton up, but you know what? We're also just going to talk about the fact that Trump is in this Epstein tape being described as Epstein's close friend and confidant. Like, why just hammer on that? Just point out, hey, this guy's not just a rapist, he's almost certainly, allegedly, a pedophile. But they can't. They can't because they were told to act nice. And in keeping with what Kyle was sort of asking to do, that acting nice thing has sort of infected here. I noticed Chris Hipkins, his little congratulatory message to Donald Trump, in stark contrast with what I thought was a wonderful commentary from Jeremy Corbyn, who was basically like, "Fuck you, dude." And I was like, why can't we have that kind of energy? Like, why can't Chris Hipkins? Why does he have to be this obsequious? I mean, I know the answer. This is a rhetorical question.
There are possibly other people in the New Zealand Labour Party who would not have done that, but I think
they should do it. They should just fucking do it. Like,
they just need to do it. They just need to do it. I mean, you asked earlier, you were sort of surprised to find out when I said that I'm absolutely thriving today. It's because I'm still absolutely just high off the hikoi hui that we had.
Yeah.
Up at Otahu Bay, Bastion Point. We went out there. I actually went and picked up my daughter from Kindy so that she could come along with me because she loves that stuff. We took her to a bunch of the Palestine marches, and so now whenever she sees flags, she just starts chanting "Fui Fui Palestine," which is the best shit. It's so funny. But yeah, so she was like pointing out all the flags and sort of I was trying to explain that Tino Rangatiratanga is not actually the flag of Palestine, but there were so many of them at the Palestine rallies that she kind of just associates the two. But it was just it was such a good session, and you know, people were coming around and like the people were giving her chocolate and stuff, and the energy was just off the chart. Incredible speaking, so many people, thousands. And so for me, I look at sort of this completely sclerotic Chris Hipkins in charge of this very sclerotic Labour Party. And I think I don't have a ton of hope for them, but I have such hope for the people that I see here that are actually standing in opposition to this vile, racist attempt at undermining the founding document of our country.
There were some Labour MPs, I can't remember who. I definitely saw a skeet from Deborah Russell about some of the Labour MPs who were on it.
Whoever was there, I want them in charge.
I think one of them was Willie Jackson. So
I know.
Take it back.
I begrudgingly faved some of his tweets about it. I think Phil Twyford, I think, might have been there, and I have no problems with him, but like at least he shows like.
Some of them can see the way the wind is blowing, even if they don't have the necessary, fire in the belly to actually rein it.
Just they know how to play the game at least. Yeah. Like even if it's purely cynical, because Hipkins just doesn't even know how to play.
Right?
But see, that's an interesting comment you make, because one of my things about Hipkins' statement is he did this whole thing, which the Obamas also did in their statement. And I'm like, really, guys, you do not have to. But Hipkins did a little comment about the peaceful transfer of power.
Yep.
And I was like,
I'm an institutionalist.
But not just an institutionalist. An institutionalist who doesn't know he is, and whose office of advisors don't know they are. So I bet you they were slapping their knees over that one in the office like, that's right. We're going to congratulate you on your peaceful transfer of power because we know you're a fascist. See how we totally...
And we know you didn't have one last time.
Yeah, and them and their mates find that funny because they don't realize that nobody else gets that they're joking. They just think they're just being these
It's
nerds.
smarmy. It comes across as smarmy. It comes across as smarmy if you are me and you're a politics nerd and you're engaged with all this stuff, and to everyone else on the planet, it comes across as you think Donald Trump is a nice guy and a valid political figure who should be treated as though he's a normal political player. And that's one of the worst things that anyone can do at that point, is to either treat him as though, the cliche from his last term, that was the day he became president, desperately waiting for the day he, proves that actually everything's fine despite everything he's doing. But also it's what you were saying, Ollie, about acting hypocritically. He won't respect democratic norms and institutions, and you can't gotcha him out of doing the fascist things. So... I mean, it's democracy and the rule of law are important, but clinging to things like, well, this thing needs to happen in this order and this paperwork needs to be signed, and isn't it an outrage that he hasn't done that? That's just going to make it worse, because all you're going to do is demonstrate how weak those democratic institutions are.
Yeah, I mean, you called it the Obama playbook, and it's true. That is what it is. But the thing is, that's the 2008 playbook, and we are that's just not the society we live in anymore. That is not the global community we live in anymore. That you cannot be that norms nerd. You cannot be that international rules-based order. We've watched the international rules-based order become a fucking joke in the eyes of the public over the last year.
Well, this is
no one's falling for that. You look at the way that the international media and major world leaders all over the world have completely kowtowed to a rogue fascist state that is carrying out the worst genocide of the 21st century. And the overwhelming consensus of the public is this is horse shit. It's not that the game changed, it's that they killed the game. They broke the game and they are still trying to play it.
Yeah, this has been an ongoing theme of the podcast for 6 years, right? The way in which liberal institutionalists, or whatever you want to call them, try to catch their opponents out. And then Trump happened, and Boris Johnson happened in the UK, and we've got what's happening now in Aotearoa, where they just don't give a shit. But I think you can be an institutionalist, but we're even past that point now. We have political parties and decision-making officials who are just comms and marketing institutionalists, because they're not even doing
comms and marketing institutionalists.
Bad comms
I
and
just want to
marketing
be
institutionalists.
clear on
They just want to say it. They just want to say the fucking words and get a fucking pat on the head. They're not actually enforcing anything. They're not making new rules. They're not creating regulations that stop people from doing this shit. They're not. We just had Elizabeth Warren, I think, on Twitter yesterday or today, saying oh, Trump's actually already doing illegal stuff. And you're like, okay, what are you going to fucking do about it then?
Well, that's the thing. If you're going to be an institutionalist, if you're going to be this anti-hypocrisy person, you kind of have to be a little bit more blameless, because they're all hypocrites too. They are consenting to a war in Israel. They are providing arms to a country that is actively carrying out a genocide, which is against US law. Yeah. So and in New Zealand, we have these institutionalist nerds, but they are supporters of Israel. And so if you are saying, oh, well, we need to respect institutions like the rule of law, we can't be hypocrites, you kind of need to not be a massive fucking hypocrite yourself. Because otherwise people will see through it, and they are.
But even obviously the genocide is the most horrible kind of leading edge of that at the moment. But even on domestic policy, okay, they're doing stuff that you think they shouldn't do, fucking do something. Even if that's just the raw enforcement of power politics. Just fucking slap them about a bit. But what I'm saying is they've retreated so far even from that. Even from being even from being someone like Chris Finlayson, right, who is just willing to just tear into ACT and the National Party over this treaty principles bill. Most liberal institutionalists aren't even willing to do that anymore, because they believe that there's a certain way that their words will poll, and that all they really need to do is slap something onto the paper, and that's their job done as a politician. There's no understanding that they actually need to wield power in any fucking way possible if they want people to vote for them.
Because then also just the entire lack of repercussions of any kind of comeuppance for Trump just sort of leads to a real political existential nihilism across the country. And sort of the sort of Jacques finger pointing. He has done this illegal thing that we will point out. We will point it out with vigor. See our trembling pointing fingers. But then absolutely no follow-up. It's a bleak thing.
Yeah.
But actually, one glimmer of hope I'm hanging on to, though, is another thing I've gathered, Americans are highly, highly anti-government, even though often the focus of their ire isn't as much the government, but it's the various sort of, privatized services that the government has now been subsumed by. The thing is, Trump, the anti-establishment type, but now he will be the establishment. Focus of rage will be upon him. Prices are not about to go down, and all the tariffs on China are going to have their own sort of flow-on effects as well. Whether or not that's going to consolidate some kind of anger against him and against the government that can then be seized on in a great mass, I don't know. It's a faint hope, but because I think people are weary and people are poor, and there's not necessarily an exit, but that's something.
In January, Trump takes charge of the genocide, and maybe we can live in hope that a bunch of elitist liberals will suddenly realize that genocide is bad, and
not on current fucking evidence, mate. Jesus Christ!
No,
well, this is that
definitely
again.
not now.
Coming back.
That is that thing, that idea of almost blinkered to the reality of the problem here. I was thinking about the Simon Wilson column that he wrote for the Herald yesterday, and the pitch for it was, when establishment parties repeatedly say they'll fix things and they don't, voters look elsewhere, even if it means choosing someone as obnoxious as Trump. Could that happen here in New Zealand? He said, "You bet." And I sort of responded to it, and I just said, I assume you're making the obvious conclusion that it already happened here, because that is what happened. I mean, that's what happened. Labor abandoned their base during the COVID recovery period. They were providing handouts to landlords. They were not providing handouts to renters. Basically, the working class and the poor of this country got screwed in the post-COVID reconstruction time. And because of that, people were angry. Their sort of core left bloc stayed home. Some of them flipped over even to ACT, who were just promising a bit of change, promising to shake things up, promising to remove bloat. And we had our Trump moment. It happened in the last election. Anyway, his response was no.
Oh my
God,
Simon.
Where else can you go?
Okay, I guess we're just going to pretend that that's not what happened, that we're going to pretend that David Seymour is not our Donald Trump, the man who is violently opposed to norms and procedure and propriety and the rule of law.
Yeah, it's just every country has its own exceptionalism, right?
He's such a goofy guy, and he twerked on TV that one time. So no one mentioned the Atlas Network. Never mentioned the Atlas Network.
No, that's a conspiracy, Stephanie.
Yeah, all those publicly available citations of his involvement with the Atlas Network and the Atlas Network's agenda.
It's so
David
good.
Seymour's CV, or should I say his resume.
That's a callback. Nice one.
I mean, it shows that he worked for them, but apparently we're not allowed to talk about that.
No, absolutely not. But they've all started to shift as well, right? In this last week or so. We're seeing a lot of really cynical, and I say it's really cynical, but it's because the far right or the right wing or whatever you want to call them at this point, they're an amorphous blob. They're all the same folks. Know that they can speak out one side of their mouth publicly in this day and age. So David Seymour will be on his Facebook saying pretty overtly racist shit, and then we'll be saying completely different stuff to reporters or in their PR releases. And media are just oh, we'll take that in good faith. And you're like, well, I think you should probably know a bit better than that by now. But, because we're always having these discussions and there's been a range of this shit post US election this time as well, just like there always is, about, they were targeting voters really well. It's the fucking algorithms they're using. They used AI. There's lots of disinfo out there through Telegram. Russia and Iran and China, we're all doing this shit. And it's no, they did targeted messaging. Yeah, we all know that. And you could have gone and found that out. And you all knew that they were doing that. And you just didn't fucking report on it. And now you're pretending like it didn't fucking happen. No, this has been happening for 300 years. And it's not even more sophisticated now.
Politicians aren't allowed to lie. And if they did lie, they'd get in trouble and someone would hold them to account. So why would you report on that?
It's so fucked, Oliver.
Someone would be holding them to account, surely. It's got to be someone's job to do that.
It's our job. We're the new media, Oliver. We're out there holding people accountable for $200 a month. Yeah, it's frightful though, and it's just so fucked seeing certain kind of more left, more progressive, more liberal journalists and reporters seemingly completely unaware of this. That no, look, it doesn't need to be disinformation because 3 weeks ago, one of your reporters was in the United States covering the campaign and just hanging out at the border towns to raise up the narrative of asylum seekers and refugees in a New Zealand context for God knows why, and then talk about how Trump had fucking tears in his eyes talking to people who were under the pump from immigrants. Are you fucking kidding me? It's happening right here in front of you. And you're saying, no, sorry, it hasn't happened here yet. But it could, it's a risk. And you can't keep pushing that out. You can't keep saying that for 40
Well,
years.
I think as Ollie says, the problem is if they acknowledged it happened here, then they'd have to wonder why they didn't do their jobs about it. And God knows, we made a cliche of it last election about the number of times that National Act would say something and everyone in the press gallery would just report it, blah, blah, blah said, and apparently they wouldn't ask any follow-up questions. And then a week later, once Craig Rennie had got a good night's sleep, he'd be like, yeah, so that's bullshit. That 2 + 2, actually, not 5, guys. Not sure if you're aware. And suddenly everyone would go, whoa, whoa. Like they couldn't possibly do the math themselves. I know they can. I know there are smart fucking spreadsheet nerds in the press gallery who could absolutely do those numbers themselves. They just don't. That's a choice, guys. Choose better.
I'm feeling very vindicated because a couple, maybe the first episode I did on this podcast was talking about the phenomenon through the COVID era that was happening a lot, where Jacinda was doing her stand-ups.
Oh yeah.
And during those stand-ups, she was getting quite piercing questions from people like Tova O'Brien and Henry Cook. And a lot of people were getting really angry and defensive and saying, you're not allowed to be bothering her with this stuff. You're not allowed to be asking these piercing questions. We need to be the team of 5 million and you're causing problems. And I was saying, guys, this is what we actually want. Those are the ones that you need to keep in the press gallery. But no, people just said, no, you have to be nice to Jacinda. And then as soon as the shoe was on the other foot, we've created this sort of idea that reporters' job isn't to hold politicians' feet to the fire. And some people seem to be overcommitted to that idea. That's not what their job is. Their job is to just be stenographers for press releases. And we don't have that culture of hostile questioning from the press gallery. Every day those horrific videos come out of the American press gallery of Matt Miller fielding questions from people like Prem Thacker who are saying, hey, why are we doing this extremely illegal thing? Hey, why are we killing children in the thousands every day? And him just having the worst answers imaginable. But we don't have that pressure here in New Zealand, to our great detriment.
Yeah, I want the gallery to be more hostile, and I want them to be more hostile to everyone. Like, it's very easy to see this as a partisan thing, but honestly,
No.
The way I would, when I worked as a press secretary, the way I would prep MPs, and then they'd get the most milquetoast crap. Like, the only time I ever underprepared someone was, and I'm just going to tell this because it's my favorite fucking story. I'm so pod save America right now, and I will not apologize. Was when a league player, I think Israel Folau, had said a lot of homophobic shit, and the gallery just kept pushing at Jan Logie because they knew they'd get a really good quote out of her, and they did. She said, "It's okay to have your faith and have your religion, just don't be a dick about it." And I was like, have I failed in my job today, or have I succeeded beyond my wildest dreams? But in every other circumstance, I'd be like, okay, now if they ask about this really detailed thing, or if they ask this really tricky thing, or here's actually a point that we don't have a good answer for, and so we're going to need to figure out how we answer it. And it never came up. And they are harder on Green MPs than they are ever harder on people like David Seymour.
Or, if I may, Grant Robertson, who was the person that I was mad about at the time, because I just couldn't understand why Grant Robertson was rolling out National Party economic policy for this country, and nobody in that gallery seemed interested in asking him, hey, why are you doing this? Why are you doing these massive handouts to landlords and not looking after renters at all? But yeah, that was the culture that we accepted.
Can we do a positive episode sometime, Kyle? It'd be a really nice
What are you
change.
talking about? This is positive. I think, like, as much as we've seen, I was going to say though, like, this is actually where I'm going to take it, because unlike a lot of other countries, we do have a really good activist, organized, empowered, and well-resourced Indigenous base here that is willing to fucking fight this. But I think, as much as we all laugh about how well-organized the left is in Aotearoa, there's a lot of immediate pushback on some of those outspurts of bigotry that have come in the last week since the election result.
I'm going to offer the most gentle rebuttal to that. It is not the left that is well organized in New Zealand. God, I wish it was.
No, I'm not saying it is. I want to be very clear
it is
about
actually
that.
Mardi who are incredibly well organized in New Zealand. And that's why things like this blow up, is because we have these community groups, we have these networks, and the whole whānau turns out. And that was it. I mean, I was there today, and I was the palest person there for a large part. It's just an ocean of Māori turning out. And I don't like to make it about this, but it is disappointing that among Pākehā there, I would have guessed probably maybe 1%. And that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. They are the overwhelming demographic majority in this country of Pākehā, and they don't show up. But Mardi do, and in such numbers that it's still an incredible turnout. But that is a testament to the power of Māori organising. And I wish the New Zealand left was able to match that energy more reliably. I mean, we've been great on the Palestine stuff. That's been awesome. But it would have been nicer to see more people show up today.
I'm hoping that'll change as
I hope so.
More coverage.
When it hits Wellington, I'm hoping when they have their one, I think tomorrow or the day after, I'm hoping we'll see, because they're great.
But it has to change.
I was going to
say,
right? I've noticed more of a presence, a Pākehā presence in the sort of march in Poinaki before.
Yeah.
Wellington is next week at time of recording.
Oh, is it next week? Okay.
They've got a whole freaking island to get down, Ollie. I realise that Aucklanders don't understand how much there is south of the Bombay Hills, but there's quite a bit.
Wow.
But yeah, there are we actually have organised groups who want to do something about it here. And as you say, we have beyond that, Māori actually will do something about it as well, which has historically been the major problem with the left. And this is the electoral left, as well as the unions, if we want to call them that, and those of us kind of in more activist spaces.
I actually have to say PSA and E2 did a great job, because today they ran the sausage sizzle and they gave out free sausages. So
hell yeah. It's but this is the thing, because Māori provide a place where other people can organize around as well, right?
Yeah.
And that's the real key thing. They're able to provide
unions are always
nervous
there.
system.
I love that. I love that you go to any sort of rally and there'll be a couple people showing up with the PSA flag, and it's I have my criticisms of PSA as a union, but I know if we're organizing something on the left wing in terms of a demonstration, I know I'm going to see a PSA flag. I know I'm going to see an E2 union flag, because they'll just, even if they don't send out the full delegation, they'll send out a rep, and that's cool.
NZNO as well, have to say. NZNO always there.
They just, it's as regular as daffodils, and I will always appreciate them. But today was especially nice because they gave my daughter a free sausage, and some chocolate actually. So if you're listening and you were there today, thank you for that chocolate.
What do we think is the likely kind of direction of this stuff as we move towards January next year and Trump's inauguration? It seems like, even in the States, well, wherever it's happening, a lot of this, the really, really horrific stuff, I've been seeing a lot of immediate takedowns of people who are, DMing or otherwise approaching women or others with really awful bigotry.
Your body, my choice thing.
Yeah, that kind of shit.
That guy got doxxed.
Yeah.
Someone showed up at his house and took a video of him, and I'm like,
there are fucking consequences
don't feel bad.
now, which has been good, been good.
And actually, what you said before, Ollie, that really gave me pause. That happening to those women in the cafe in plain sight. I'm kind of leery of, and I call this sort of a handmaid's tale tendency. Just a lot of what I'm seeing, especially among liberal women in the States, this idea of just prioritizing the vulnerability of particularly white middle class women at this juncture. I don't think we are particularly vulnerable, and I think, and I don't want to undermine hideous shit that would happen to young women, and maybe I've aged out of the harassment phase, but I think there are more vulnerable groups. The idea of, that those proliferating hashtags, that's fucking gross, and there clearly are approaches people are making. I think women being empowered to smack men down publicly is fucking great. I'm glad Nick Fuentes has gone to his mum's house, apparently. I just think they're going to come for people who are less socially well armed, and that's what's scaring me a lot more.
The homeless,
homeless concentration camp. I know.
Well,
they're looking to run out the Gavin Newsom plan.
California plan. Newsom, the guy who showed up to the homeless camp and personally, the governors don't normally do this. That guy loves hurting homeless people, so he showed up in person to destroy the encampment. That's crazy. And there are people being like, "Well, he's the next Demnom," and I'm like, "Is he the homeless bashing guy?"
The only thing I would say, absolutely +1 on everything Mardi said, but the only thing I would say is useful in that sudden outpouring of just blatant mask off misogyny is that maybe it will wake up some white middle class women who don't see themselves as part of a broader movement, who don't understand how, yes, we are down the list, but we are on the list, and we will absolutely, if we let them get away with shitting on homeless people and migrants and trans people and sex workers and every other group, then it is Handmaid's Tale time. So, I mean, the classic cliche of the Handmaid's Tale is Margaret Atwood said, I only based it on things that had really happened in the real world. And the response is, yes, but not typically to white women. That's why it's a dystopia. But that is the kind of opportunity of how awful and how quickly people are going, because to me a real fear is that they do dial it back and then people naturally fall into their institutional, oh well, see, it's not that bad, it wasn't camps on day one. So maybe people can see that as a wake-up call, to these people really mean what they say and they are testing the boundaries to see what they can get away with. And also, you know, I'm a card-carrying Green Party member. I subscribe to principles of non-violence for conflict resolution. But if someone is threatening you with rape and murder, you are allowed to punch them in the face. That's just an ethical standpoint.
I think, yeah. Oh, man, in answer to your question, Carl, I feel very dark about what happens in January. I feel very dark about it, but there is a light in amidst that. And I think what I try to remember is that during Trump's last presidency, the last time I've ever felt even remotely optimistic about the future of the United States was the George Floyd riots, which much maligned by the liberal class now, was the last time I've seen a mass mobilization of working class people against institutional power in that, to that capacity. And I know it's a kind of a controversial thing to say, but like watching them go out and break shit and get results. Boy, did they get some results, which were then wound back as quickly as possible by the people who are like, well, the pressure's off now. But, you know, maybe there's a silver lining in that with Trump back in power again. Like we said, maybe suddenly people will realize, hey, this genocide in Palestine is wrong. Maybe we do need to stand up. Maybe we do need to start joining these student protesters instead of criticizing them for what they're doing. Maybe we do actually need to start breaking shit, because the overwhelming inference of the last 20 years is that this approach of like rules and norms and obeying the rules, but also even things like nonviolent passive resistance, they're just not the play for the modern age. And honestly, they weren't really the play in the past. We look back on the sort of previous movements as in these like rose-tinted glasses, imagining that they were very peaceful, that they just sort of did all the right things and went through all the right sort of non-violent things. And it ignores the fact that there was actually a violent movement behind those things.
Hey, look, one day Rosa Parks was just tired, okay? And she just...
that is what they teach.
Sat down for no reason. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've known, I don't know, for me, I'm Mardi, I'm Te Atiawa. I grew up, my iwi is Te Atiawa, and my marae is Parihaka. So I grew up on this like doctrine of nonviolent passive resistance that for me, the nail in the coffin for that was the Palestinian March of Return. For me, that was one of the most eye-opening political moments of my life, of looking at this objectively peaceful demonstration and watching the Israeli military open fire on women, children, completely innocent people marching along the fence in Gaza. Watching them killing and kneecapping children was my moment of going, oh, this is going to be the standard. This is going to be the response. There are two kinds of passive resistance. There's non-disruptive, which the government can ignore, and there's disruptive, where they are just going to send in the cops and bash your head in. So, and like you look at that, the Gaza encampments that we had here, they sent in the cops, they bashed their heads in. So there's just, you can do this non-violent stuff. The paradigm has shifted. The government know they don't have to respect that anymore. They know that they can build enough consent to just completely cross the line with violence. That's the future of America. The future of America is unspeakable violence, and there is no other alternative. So the question is, are you going to be the one having violence enacted upon you, or are you going to be the Robespierrians?
It could be too. I mean, now that the unspeakable fascist violence is not being enacted by a Democrat government, there may be some, as you were saying, Ollie, there may be some liberal opposition as well. I actually think there could be a very strange bedfellow situation as far as Palestinian resistance with the left and then joined by the libs and then possibly and I don't love this, but there could be the wild card of your Trumpist anti-Semitic groper type who could kind of glom in as well. It could be a very strange little coalition there. Anyway, just the passivity of Democrat voters in the face of a fascistic Democrat government has been grim as hell. So yeah, another little glimmer of hope is that they may have one of those living in a permanent present switch to realizing that this
fascism is real
violence
again.
It's real again.
Yeah.
Violence against student protesters is bad, etc. It always has been. We've always been at war with East Asia, etc. So
and they're gonna go back to burning down police stations, please, because it is time.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for.
And do we think that this is likely to say stuff does get worse over there, or we see an increase in this rhetoric coming out of the United States, especially as we see them enact some of these like really horrific policies, and give, I guess, tacit permission to policymakers and decision makers in the rest of the West to make some of these decisions as well, knowing that the US has got their back. Is that likely to come here as well, do we think? Yes. Is that going to be something that we're seeing an increase of in New Zealand?
Yes.
It has a massive normalizing effect, even if we don't see the current government embrace it wholeheartedly, which I basically think, and this is not to say that there are good people in the National Party, but there are definitely some people who think of themselves as good people and who will already be very uncomfortable with the bargains they've made with New Zealand First and ACT to gain power, but still really like power, which is why they're still in there. But they wouldn't be willing to go as far as I think Luxon would, and I think Winston certainly would, and I think David Seymour intends to at some point in his political career. But the normalizing effect, especially if, as we have seen time and again, our media just pick up and replicate American narratives of what's going on. I remember during the must be the 2020 election campaign, how suddenly our news broadcasts had all these stories about the alleged human caravan heading towards the Southern American border. Oh my God, with no context, no interrogation, a clip package imported from CNN, and literally going to their foreign correspondent standing outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., offering nothing in terms of real context or information that would enlighten you as to why this was happening. So if we don't get really clear in our heads as a country about that shit being bad, I think it will just become a part of shifting the Overton window, making those things more apparent, making it harder for a Labour Party who show no instinct so far to actually step up and challenge the status quo.
Well, not just
to oppose it.
Yeah, I was going to say not even just opposing it, but stop supporting it, because Labour have broadly been accepting of things like the expansion of police powers in New Zealand. Very grateful. I always go back to this. Thankful to Andrew Little for reversing 3 strikes, but they very nearly, were it not for sort of mass mobilization, I think, against it, considered giving guns to police, and that was under a Labour government. And I've sort of proposed this thesis many years ago now, and over the years I've gotten more and more convinced of it, is that this shift that we're seeing in the global politic, both in the right wing but also in the sort of centrist parties, is actually a response to the worsening pressures of climate change. And I think whether they are doing it from a enthusiastic love of repression and authoritarianism, or a fear of the repercussions of what we're going to see, which is increasing global unrest, they have run into the arms of support for things like surveillance state expansion and expansion of police power, because they look to the future, they see the sort of frightening, inevitable violence of it, and they go, well, instead of trying to mitigate it, what if we just try to put ourselves in a position where we can't be harmed by it? And a big part of that has been this increase of police state centric policy across the political board, with the exception of these sort of smaller fringe parties like Greens, who have been trying to fight back against it.
Yeah, I mean, I was like wondering how eye-opening seeing the long-term plans of agricultural logistics companies are, right? Or, even just like long-term plans for defense forces.
Auckland Council has plans for seawater rise, where they talk about in their consenting plans for things on coasts how much we need to retreat because it is inevitable that sea level is going to rise. And they talk about it like, oh, this is something we need to think about in terms of urban development. But it's also like, people are going to be rioting when that becomes a priority. Like, I don't know if building development is nearly going to be the priority at that point, but they know it. That's my point, is that Labour, Jacinda Ardern was in no illusions about climate change being real. The question is, they know it's real. How do you want to respond to it?
Well, it was Michael Wood who passed the mass arrivals bill, right? Like ostensibly one of the most left-wing MPs in the Labour Party, like legislating for Fortress New Zealand, which is like just like it's evil. It's fucking horrific.
Again, they think that they are good people and therefore what they do must be justified. But also, and I've had so many arguments with comrades in the Labour Party about this, they really buy into that idea of you have to say what you need to say in order to get elected. And then apparently magically you do progressive stuff. Not that they did that over the last 2 terms they had, including the one where they had an absolute majority. While you guys have been talking, I've been desperately trying to Google because I couldn't remember if Ed Miliband did a Stop the Boats pledge. It wasn't quite that, but there's the classic Ed Miliband as leader of UK Labour standing in front of the 6 pledges carved into stone because no Labour Party leader ever met a pledge card they didn't want to immortalise. And yeah.
I thought you were just going to say fuck. Same difference.
I mean, band, big stone pledge, controls on immigration. I would be completely unsurprised if in the 2026 election we have Chris Hipkins talking tough on immigration and
inevitable
and pretending it's about like caring about workers or pretending it's caring about a housing crisis. But
and then everyone who's ever come at me for saying that I should like give Chris Hipkins a chance, fuck you.
I got your back.
He can demonstrate change and an ability to drive passionate enthusiasm, red meat, progressive policy anytime he likes. And you know what? We'll all be pretty happy. I mean, we won't like him or trust him, but we'd be delighted if they put out just one press release saying capitalism bad.
Foreign people are our friends, because that's just the baffling thing. Even seeing Labour like positioning to sort of deal with the incoming anti-China stuff is the other one. That sort of the foreign sounding names stuff was another one. Like that xenophobia that's sort of present. I think for me, one of the sort of defining moments of the like I said, I've been a sort of maybe I'm going too hard on this particular topic, but a critic of Jacinda Ardern. But one of the most memorable moments for me was when the scandal came out about the Australian military SAS Special Forces guys who were raping and killing children in Afghanistan. And the Labour Party did not release a statement about it. They didn't criticize it. They didn't criticize the Australian government. They didn't criticize the Australian military. But when a Chinese newspaper ran the story, Jacinda Ardern went on TV and criticized the newspaper for reporting on what Australian military was doing. And for me, that was like a near perfect encapsulation of what Western media sphere looks like. It is just our team versus theirs. We don't care that the Australian military is raping and murdering children in Afghanistan. We care that China pointed it out.
Bad. Well, maybe we'll give it a wrap. Mardi, any final thoughts from the other time zone?
No, I think I'm spent. Sorry, gang.
No, good.
Rosie wants to put on a cup of tea, so it's a good time to call it.
3 a.m. here. I'm so sorry.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you
so much for joining us. Really appreciate having you here and bring that perspective. Thanks to Stephanie and Oliver as well here in Aotearoa. I guess just quickly, Mardi, where can people find you online?
Please don't find me online. Sorry.
Okay. No, all good. Stephanie, how about you?
Me online, bootstheory.nz, Boots Theory on Blue Sky, not on godforsaken Twitter anymore. Mostly Blue Sky and TikTok. I actually have a banger TikTok planned about the Treaty Principles Bill, so everyone should go and follow me there.
And Oliver, where can people try and get around a shadow ban to find you?
Yeah,
online?
I think I'm shadow banned on Twitter. I don't know what's going on. It's weird. People can't see my tweets, so don't worry about it. What you should do is go to Albert Park and leave an encrypted message underneath the bench next to the fountain, and I will find it.
You heard it here first, folks. The beginning of our ARG, one of 200 mysteries. Thanks so much for our audience for tuning in. I know we've been a little bit spotty as we've been on a current events hiatus. We'll be back pretty soon, I think. We're just putting the pieces together and waiting for me to commit to Saturday morning in my calendar again. That's been an episode of 1 of 200. Support the Hikoi. Support Indigenous rights and the fight back against the Treaty Principles Bill. You're going to be able to find so much information about that out there. But yeah, just keep in touch with each other, turn up to some marches together, and get activated. We'll catch you later.
Artificers are denied. Live in a pointless life, but learning all your lessons. Fucking politics, there's no distinction. The road's apart now. It's paid with good intentions. And I'll admit that I'm at a loss for what to say. When they quote this as a cost, we ought to stay. 'Cause I live amongst the people every day.